Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another amazing episode of the Grateful Redhead podcast. If you haven't tuned in before, I'm Angie Ringler, your Grateful Dead loving host, and I am joined today by a comedian, a performance artist, and also an elected official from Koreatown in Los Angeles. Yes, all three. And I found this young woman on Tree Hugger. I was reading a cool article on Tree Hugger years ago where they talked about eco comedians, and of course, I was really taken back by her. Don't tell me it was the Going Green the Wong Way. So I want to introduce Kristina Wong to my show today, but she's got a lot of cool projects going on that are really connecting, reducing waste, reaching out to finding better ways to work together, especially in this pandemic. She started a really cool project, but I don't want to reveal any secrets. I'm going to let her introduce herself and share a little bit about what has brought her to this point today. And we're going to dive deep into what she's got going on. So Kristina, welcome to the show, and
hi,
everybody who you are.
Thank you for having me, Angie. This is my cat Happy. If anyone's watching on video, he just leaped into my arms. So we're just going to do this interview like that.
Happy cat. I don't think anybody will mind Happy Cat being in the picture.
Yeah. Hey, yes. What do you got for me?
Tell us, let's start with, who you are. Like, what brought you? Okay, I'm assuming you started out not as a comedian, but that was kind of your first job really into this.
Well, I'll tell you my quick and dirty fast journey.
There you go.
What I do now is I tour a lot of shows. I've written myself, and I'm the only performer on stage. A lot of my shows have my name built into it. So Kristina Wong for Public Office was about how I just recently ran for office and won in Koreatown. Kristina Wong Sweatshop Overlord is the recent show I just closed off Broadway, which is about how I ran a group called the Auntie Sewing Squad in the pandemic. And we sewed masks for folks. Going Green the Wong Way was about sort of my attempts and failures at sustainable living, which I know is how you found me. What else? Wong Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was about depression and suicide. What else? Is there any other show? Oh, the Wong Street Journal was about a trip I took to Uganda where I ended up making a rap album with local rappers. But it also explores my proximity to white privilege as an Asian American in another country that I don't have blood ties to that is of color. So a lot of what that sort of side of my work looks like. I guess I always admired comedians. I would watch a show called Star Search when I was growing up. I'm dating myself a little bit, and I don't even think I understood half the jokes because there's all these references and whatever. But I just loved watching them get laughs and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I got to college, had thought that maybe I might pursue acting, looked at what was available to me as an Asian woman, was like, well, this seems like a very scary way to use my undergraduate degree because you can't double major when you're UCLA. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to like major in theater and then, and just compete with other people for roles that aren't really written for people like me. But then I discovered this whole genre of performance art, which is like really weird, terrible, sometimes cathartic, imaginative work that didn't always play out in theaters, that was the kind of work that is often devised in the course of rehearsal, doesn't really necessarily always require audition, because it's very personal to the person who makes it. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to make deep and brooding performance art. And I found myself making fun of myself a lot, my work, and sometimes my colleagues, and people started to introduce me as a comedian, and I just started to own it because it was easier for the market to understand what I do. I don't necessarily do stand-up so much as these sort of performative interventions, which include my own solo shows. So it's been a 20-year journey as a solo artist. And I can't imagine what else I would do with myself than this. I can't imagine maybe, but I think that I sort of found myself here. And I feel very fortunate to have made it this long as an
It's
artist.
nice when you find your niche like that and you find a place to feel comfortable and that you
Yeah.
can relate to and stuff like that. So again, I found you on, the Going Green the Wong Way, which I thought was hysterical. And, have you always been kind of dabbling in that low waste? Because I do want to also
Yes.
fast forward in this conversation. We will also talk about, your efforts to reduce your food waste in current day. So
Yeah.
maybe you can
So I will
connect
say
those two.
that the thread in all my work is that I often play a character named Kristina Wong. That's my real name.
Hey.
Who attempts like these kind of sophomoric and simplistic attempts to sort of make the world better, and then gets way more complicated. So Going Green the Wong Way was sort of what I call the accidental pregnancy show, which was like I wasn't actually planning on making it, but I was telling a story at a storytelling show about this car that I owned that ran on vegetable oil. I bought it in 2006, and it caught on fire on the freeway in 2008. And I was so excited. I was on the calendar section of the LA Times, looking really sexy. It was this pink Mercedes, but it was a complete money suck. It was a 25-year-old diesel Mercedes that had been converted with like hipster scientists had like converted it to pump this hot vegetable oil in the car. And it was like vegetable oil like went from being really cheap to very expensive within like the first few months of owning it. And I was finding myself like in alleyways, like meeting people who had left notes in my car saying they might have vegetable oil. Like it just got worse and worse and worse, cost thousands of dollars, caught on fire. And then I found myself going green in the most wrong way possible, which for 12 years I had no car. But in terms of like that little story was sort of the seed of me exploring all the sort of stuff I had done since I was like in middle school. I was in a science contest where you had to create a lesson plan that you teach other people, and mine was about saving the environment. And I was like, holy crap, like we are running out of time. This was like the early 90s, right? When I was
You were well ahead of your time.
It was way ahead. There were no Boca burgers, there were no whatever, but I chose to become a vegetarian, which is crazy when you're Chinese American to tell your family, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. Like it basically says to your family, I can't eat anything. I can't,
Especially in the 90s. Like it's so different than the
90s,
grocery
yeah.
store than today.
Yeah, in the 90s in San Francisco where I grew up, there was like a natural food store, and you'd actually have to like buy bagfuls of this TVP mix that you would add to water, and it was terrible. It was like this terrible version of a veggie burger, but that's, my mother sort of met me halfway and got me that. I was like, oh, this sucks. Now we have like burgers that like fake burgers that bleed and stuff. Yeah. But I was just I didn't really know how to go about it. I just sort of would just proselytize and yell at my fellow students for using styrofoam and aerosol cans. And I didn't, and so I sort of make fun of that stage of my life. In high school, I was a door-to-door canvasser one summer for the Sierra Club, CalPERG. Basically, I went door-to-door signing people up. It was like I surprisingly was good at it. It sounds like an awful job, and it was. If you brought home the minimum commission of $100, you get $40 of that, which comes out to $5 an hour. But basically, and sometimes I wouldn't even make that $100, right? So it's just like being a beggar, going door to door. But I was actually surprisingly really good at it because, if me versus my coworkers who are all like these sort of pothead, like white dreadlock kind of people, like if me ringing on your doorbell versus them, like you're more likely to open the door for me and go, right. Oh, little girl, you lost. And I'd be like, hi. You were. And then when the other story I tell is about trying to use a Diva cup. I use cloth pads now. I like to tell people, I don't know if I like telling people this, but I have been using the same cloth pads for like 8 years. So
hey, nothing wrong with that. And that's the stories we need to be telling.
How long do those pads actually work? But the Diva cup got stuck in me, and so that was like the first and last time I did it. It was so I tell that story too. So, but I have like this, and now I think I have. I'm not saying I'm in no way zero carbon footprint. I don't compost. It's a lot of stuff I don't do, but I at least feel like I have a better understanding about how to do this that isn't so self-torturing, that isn't about, uh, yelling and screaming at other people constantly.
Yeah.
That there have to be other strategies about this. It's not about walking around in a potato sack forever. But it is sort of thinking about like what kind of these small shifts can you make, and especially on a legislative level, like what can you push for at a legislative level to.
Yeah. And I'm realizing that more and more too, that, my efforts at home are great. My efforts through my business to, reduce plastic packaging and get rid of all that kind of crap that ends up in the environment is wonderful. But I'm realizing that more and more has to come from that top level, and those changes need to be made from right now I'm reading Bill Gates' new book. And, it really is insightful of the big changes that have to be made. I'm about halfway through it and I'm really enjoying the read.
Is he making those changes in his own powerful capacity, or
yes,
writing books?
So far what I'm learning is that he is supporting these companies that have the ability to really think ahead and do some research and kind of make the changes that need to be made. And he gives he gives pros and cons to all of that, even as far as like, he grew up eating cheeseburgers and he still does every now and again, but what he realizes is that look at the impact that animals have.
Yep.
And how we clear perfectly good land and in forests in order to, have cattle. But he also talks about, the ability that people aren't just going to get off of meat. So we have to look at alternatives in order to really make those changes, because we have to make drastic changes in a short period of time in order to have a chance, a decade.
Getting off meat is a huge one. And I was a vegetarian. I had dairy up until college. I added seafood back in, mostly because it was so hard to participate culturally in anything without an out. And so I've just sort of created some parameters for myself now where I'm going to be vegan. Whatever groceries I pay for are vegan. If I eat out, maybe I'll eat seafood, but I won't consciously bring seafood or dairy into the house unless it's given to me. So maybe a friend has chickens and they give me eggs, or if my friend who works at the food bank hands me a bunch of stinky cheese, oh, well, I guess I got to eat the stinky cheese, so it's, so these are these sort of parameters I set up that the idea is, and we all have our ways around it. And I know I have vegan friends who won't even let me bring stir fry into their house if it has a little bit of egg into it. They won't let me store it in their fridge for the hour that I'm there, right? And it's we all have sort of our rules, and and I think these are things that maybe help us figure out ways to do that. I think my new rule is I'm going to just only buy things thrifted. Which I've done before. I have a highly thrifted wardrobe, but I think when clothes, it still is. Clothing is very cheap. I couldn't help myself. I was like, I can reinvent myself constantly, but it's not good. And there's actually some really good shit at Goodwill. I'm wearing a Goodwill thrifted jumpsuit. That was about $8.
Oh, there's some amazing stuff. People overshop. We've all had bouts of overshopping and bringing something home and being like, nah, I don't like it here. I liked it in the store, but not here. And it ends up at the thrift store still with the tag on it. So
I know it did well. You can exchange things. I've done a bunch of, they're not letting people try things on right now, at least in Southern California, because of COVID. But yeah, I got really into there's a Instagram channel I love called Thrift and Tell. It's a woman, she's gorgeous. She lives in Augusta, Georgia, and she buys thrifted items, and she like granny sets and stuff, and she'll tie and knot and tuck this thing, and suddenly she looks like a music video star. She's like gorgeous. And it's gotten me so into like, wow, I didn't see the beauty in some of these things, but she doesn't sew. And just
and it's all about perspective, right? It's looking at something in a different way. And it's like all these companies like Stitch Fix, I think it's called, and Rent the Runway. I mean, there are amazing women coming out with very well thought out solutions to these problems that we're having with.
How is Stitch Fix a solution to waste?
Because you're being able to order certain things that are good for you, right? You kind of work with a stylist instead of the idea of you're going to end up with too much stuff that you don't wear.
You don't need. I see. Okay.
And then they take them
Yeah.
back and they're finding, the right places for it. So I think
Yeah.
that they
But
are
I do
filling
find
a
a lot of
niche.
the stuff from those boxes at the Goodwill, which still have tags on them,
Which still
just
have
like
that.
stuff that they like over ordered and no one wanted in
Yeah.
the boxes.
But it is about finding that kind of comfort level for ourselves and knowing that, okay, if I'm going to make this change, will it stick? Because if it
Yeah.
doesn't stick and we go back to our old habits, then it didn't bring us any value. It doesn't bring the planet any value. And it is about finding that kind of, I always call it our personal brand standard, right? What are we
Mhm.
willing to put up with? And not. So, talk a little bit about where you are right now with your food waste and kind of challenging yourself with that.
Yeah. So in the pandemic and pre-pandemic, I found myself very comforted watching like unboxing videos, which somehow led to grocery haul videos. And I was like, how is this a thing where you just watch what people bought at the grocery
I've
store?
never heard
Which
of that.
led to this is how I eat at Dollar Tree for $10 a week. And I was like, I never really, for me, I never put a cap on my grocery budget. I'm a single woman. I guess if I had a bunch of family members to take care of, but it was always a non-negotiable. Like if you need food, pay for the food. Like don't, don't put these parameters. But I was like, how much does food actually cost? Because I was noting, I tour a lot or was touring. Now, I'm just getting back on tour again and seeing how much food I'd be given in a green room. And then would toss, and somebody would try to bring back and would just toss it when I go home. And I love like the resourcefulness of folks who challenge themselves to just spend $50 or $100 on groceries. And so I just discovered a few places in my neighborhood. One was La Raya's Bodega, where it was just like an all vegan sort of bodega. They would get items donated, and food was just like $1 to $5 an item, like really good stuff. And I was like, wow, I left with 2 bags of food for $17. And I
Wow.
would just sort of mentally track how long it lasted me. I'm like, wow, this lasted 2 weeks. Because I used to just eat out all the time. And and then I was like, I wonder if I could do one of these $50 challenges. And it was just really fascinated, like the power of one onion to like flavor all your food, or the power of seasoning, or the power of condiments that you hold on to. And I happened to walk by, I was getting my sewing machine fixed, and I walked past this place I've always seen in the neighborhood called World Harvest Charities, or World Harvest Food Bank, and and it said social supermarket. It was so unclear like what this was. I walked in, there were no prices on anything. It looked like a market. And I bought a few things, and they were like, we'll just tell you how much it is when you bring it to the counter. And everything was like $1 a piece. And it was like really fun stuff, like Japanese crackers. And then I went home and researched it. Turns out they have this whole deal where if you can volunteer there for 4 hours for a giant cart of food, or pay $40 for this giant cart of food. And I was like, I want to try this. So I went to volunteer, and because I also was like, I don't want to take food from my neighbors if they need it. Like I don't want to run this place bare and then someone shows up. But as it turns out, there's so much food at this particular food bank. And I became friends with the owner, and he was handing me sashimi grade fish on the way out. He was handing, like, their stock has shifted during this supply chain shortage and post pandemic, but they still have a lot of really amazing stuff. They have like all these Beyond Burgers. So basically, when Costco gets a shipment, and if the pallet is dented, they can reject the entire pallet, and all that stuff would be bound for the landfill.
What?
And yeah. So he takes it. And so he gets all the returns from, like when you buy stuff from Costco and you return it. And this is the same with Amazon. When you buy stuff at Amazon, it doesn't go back on the shelf. They don't have the
they have some like
like
disposable deal where they could either like
it just
donate
gets
it or
thrown
sell
out.
it. Yeah, sell it in like.
And I've learned there are like systems to kind of reclaim it. There are resellers on eBay who buy pallets of unmanifested returns, right? But a lot of that also ends up at Glenn's place. So I've gotten all sorts of weird stuff that's been returned shown up in my house. And I'm just in love with this place. And so for the last 2 years now, I stuck with a $50 grocery budget. This doesn't count eating out. But sort of the rules I set for myself now are like, I can't eat out by myself. Eating out is something reserved to be a social thing, right? Otherwise, I had to cook at home, and really just go through my pantry and note the food around me. And so I've gotten food from my Buy Nothing group. I've also distributed too much food that I've received from the food bank to my Buy Nothing group. When I'm at a party and there's too much and they're packing, leftovers, I take the leftovers and I eat them. Right. So this is food waste is like a very simple thing. And you can sort of set these rules, and I've saved a shit ton of money. Like I obsessively track my grocery spending on my phone, and I put it in notes. Right. And I'm like, so I repost it every month, and everyone's like, how the fuck did you do that? I mean, yes, I have this insane food bank in my neighborhood.
Yeah, that helps.
But, which helps a lot,
Yeah.
but you could pull it off with like a rice, lentils, and greens diet.
Even if somebody said, well, okay, let me do maybe they're a family and they've got 3 or 4 kids, and they're like, Kristina, that is, not going to happen in my lifetime, but they could maybe bring it down. If they're spending $500, they could say, let me try 300, and just
I would say that there are people on YouTube whose whole videos are dedicated to feeding their family. I won't name them, but if you look up like budget cooking challenge and stuff, you'll find people who are mothers, and they're showing you how they cooked for their entire family for $150 for the month.
Now, do you feel like you've had to get, reduce nutritional value in some way? I mean, are you buying like mostly packaged food? How's that?
No, I think that's the thing is I'm not buying processed food.
Oh,
it's really lentils. Like a bag of lentils is pretty cheap. A bag of beans that you haven't cooked yet is pretty cheap. If you buy the vegetables, it's when you buy the frozen meals or the pre-frozen pizza, or that's where things get more expensive because someone else has helped cook it for you.
Right.
But actually, I would say it's actually the opposite, is that I'm getting more into the Whole Foods and the more, not the grocery store, but like but like foods closer to their element. I go to the 99-cent like back shelf at Smart and Final, the stuff that's going to get tossed. Which is actually not in that bad shape. It's just very ripe. So I get a bag of avocados for 99 cents, but watching a lot of these food videos has helped me think about how to eat closer to the food chain. Is that what you call lower down on the food chain? But anyway, less animals and less like
I think it is lower down.
Machine that pre-makes pasta makes it. And and it's great. Like I've actually, it's this great challenge of I get given, and we don't know what's going to be at the food bank all the time, right? And so I'll get like a giant bag of tomatoes. And I used to just think, oh, you can only get spaghetti sauce out of a jar. No, you can make spaghetti sauce. You can it's a little bit of work. You boil the tomatoes, you fry up some onions, but you can I think we become afraid of food. Yeah. And that's what a lot of this has been healing for me, because I think for many years, I just thought I was sort of a failure in that department. But it was like, I realized I was either overbuying or, became afraid of how to cook certain things, or thought that it very specifically applesauce only can be eaten like this,
right?
But you can use it like as a sweetener, right? Like you can like just sort of rethink
that. Kind of have that one train of thought for like a particular item or a spice or something. And but it sounds like in all of what you're saying, it really is just about being aware of the food that we already have. There has been plenty of times, right? I go to the grocery store and I buy something. I'm like, I have something similar. I get home and unload it and realize I have something similar to that. Or I already had that, even worse, right? I just bought another one because it's something that is in my repertoire of buying. But so it does make you hyper aware when you kind of challenge yourself like that to say, let me just make sure I'm using what I got first.
Yeah. And I think this helped me understand, there's a June, this woman named June on this channel, Delish. She does these amazing challenges where it's she just recently did one where she replicated all the contents of a pantry box, the free food pantry box you might get, and tried to just see how long she could stretch it. And she got really creative. She had a box of cornflakes and she used it in lieu of flour or grain. She pounded it up and mashed it up with stuff. I love how her brain works, that you don't need actual flour. Just find something that's grainy and mix it up, right? You don't need actual milk, like dairy milk. There could be some other plant-based milk or some other milky type thing in your
Something, yeah.
pantry that you can just use, right? Like like watching her, it's just like watching food. It's just a weird chemistry class, and maybe you won't like what you make, but to get into this idea of experimenting that not all salt has to be actual salt, right? Like there are ways you can break
Provide
things
that
up, cut things
kind of
up,
taste. Or that.
yeah, and that has been really liberating. But I don't think I would have been able to handle this food bank in my 20s. I would have just like been like, oh my God, all this food's going to rot. I
I
don't
think
know
that
what to
we
do with
do
all
gain a
this.
lot of wisdom as we get older, for sure. I like to
Yeah.
refer to it as wisdom, for sure. I mean, even not so long ago, I love cereal. So, we were out of milk. Normally we do some plant-based milk, and we didn't have any, and I poured out a bowl of cereal for myself, and so I just added cold water from the refrigerator, and it was freaking delicious. I'm
It's
like,
fine, right?
I'm
Yeah,
like,
like I used
oh
to
my
be
God.
like,
If somebody would have said to me, just use water with your
it's
cereal,
water. That's all most plant-based
I
milk
would
is
have snubbed
water.
my nose at them, be like, no way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now I eat my cereal most of the time with just cold. I do like it cold, I must admit. So I use the cold water out of the fridge, but I think it's delicious. So it is
Yeah.
perspective. It's a matter of just trying different things. And,
Yeah.
I think that the pandemic, like you kind of mentioned earlier, was that it does bring us out of that norm, right? It's making us think outside the box a little bit. And I know that you started a mask making foundation.
Yeah.
It's
not a foundation, but it was a collective, which ended up becoming mutual aid. I love like when people use words like an organization.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Mutual aid, though. That was a term that I'm not familiar with. Like I know,
and I was not either. Someone was like, "Oh, what you're doing is mutual aid," and I was like, "I was not at that conference." So I looked up.
I missed that day too.
I went on.
Tell me about that.
I missed that day in school, and I went on YouTube, and basically, it's. I mean, the way it had been explained to me, I was like, "Oh, that sounds potentially bad. Like if someone needs something, you get it to someone." And I had been on groups labeled mutual aid, and it was a lot of people saying, "I need money tonight for a hotel. I need money. I need money." And I was just like, "Oh, is this what this is?" Like, because it just seems sort of like I get that there needs to be a space where people don't have to go through all the paperwork of applying for like government aid or something, but it was also like we're just supposed to send money to people, to strangers, but it can play out in different ways. And for us specifically, it was making homemade masks for vulnerable communities who needed it the most. And then that sort of moved to us delivering relief aid to communities like the Navajo Nation and border communities, incarcerated communities, farm workers, unhoused communities. And it really just started as me thinking, oh, this will be like a 2 or 3 week thing until the government, that thing we can rely on so well, shows up and and gets masks to everyone.
Right.
But who knew that masks would be this politically polarizing thing that we'd fight over, and that parents would, refuse to put on their children and insist their rights were being infringed upon. But here we are. So anyway, yeah, it was called the Auntie Sewing Squad. Acronym is ASS. And we grew into a collective of 800 aunties across 33 states, and who are all doing different things, sewing masks, providing care for each other, because it became very clear, like, we're not expendable. Right. And some people who are used to ordering things on Amazon are talking to us this way. And that's not what this is. Like, this is not press 2 buttons and something shows up. This is us committing back to you to support you and your health. Right. And so, so we needed to make sure our aunties were being taken care of, because a lot of them were getting super stressed out.
And are you guys still doing masks? Has it shifted away from that a little bit?
Yeah, we retired. Yes, we retired on August 15th. Some of our aunties are still sewing. So we went on for about 17 months. That's a long ass time. Factory made masks are here. In fact, I'm helping try to reroute about how many masks am I trying to reroute? I'm trying to reroute pallets of 28,000 masks each that were made by factories from there are a bunch of companies that just have masks. They need to get rid of them. So we have built these amazing community partner lists of communities that can distribute them. I wish that they had arrived earlier, but I mean, they probably realized they couldn't profit from them and got to the point where they would take a tax write-off. So we've done that. And then we did a coat drive for Lakota folks, where it gets below zero. There are situations where some students weren't able to go to school because they're too cold to go to school.
That's sad.
And then they owe money to the government for tuition. So suddenly, like, not having a coat means you owe the government money because you weren't able to go to school. You didn't have a coat. So it's been really eye opening. That's what my show, Kristina Wong Sweatshop Overlord, became about, was not just like this sort of family that I founded in the pandemic, but also looking at where the most vulnerable of communities are and what has made them so vulnerable. And that's systemic racism, that's structural violence, that is like the entire history of federal government neglect in these communities. That especially some of these reservations, like the more and more we would look at their needs and look at like how they cannot own their land, in some cases cannot farm their land, we were like, wow, they've literally like just been left to die, to suffer and die.
It is really sad when we look back on the history of that and what's taken place and what hasn't changed all these years. And honestly, it's getting worse in a lot of situations. Do you find that your elected official status has helped you in this whole thing?
I have said this on many interviews. I feel like I've gotten more done running the Auntie Sewing Squad than an elected official. It's very frustrating.
The power of the people.
This is not to say there's not power in running for office, but I do feel like for me, it's going to be a combination of both participating in government, but also just like getting stuff to where it needs to go. Government is slow.
Yeah.
Democracy is slow. Justice is slow. Like it also can be very expensive. And our meetings, like we had a meeting on Monday that 15 minutes in, we couldn't reach quorum, which means that we don't have enough people to make a vote, a minimum amount of people to make a vote on anything. So we're not meeting till next month. That's right. So this is rough. If it was a tyranny, I had a friend called because she has a slumlord and she's like, what can you help me do? And I'm like, actually, absolutely nothing. I know it sounds powerful that I'm elected and I can like make your landlord fix a hole in the ceiling. I actually can't do it. I can't do that. I could call to help you, but I don't, I don't have the power to.
I can put something on official letterhead and make it look good, but nothing's going to come of it.
Yeah.
So how can people get more involved in like what you're doing? You know, you're raising a lot of good points of to where we are lacking in certain areas. Where do you think that, you know, us and you know, the listeners right now, how can they get involved to help out in these certain areas that really need some attention?
I mean, it doesn't have to, you don't have to do the world, I think. There's, and I look at our aunties and that group, like that was such a learning lesson for me. It's not like I knew how to run a mutual aid group. I didn't even know what mutual aid was, right? But like it was like, we realized not everyone's going to learn how to sew masks. Some people did try to learn to sew for this project. But so we had people who were able to give a few hours and cut. Some people just cut elastic, right? Some people like baked cookies to build morale. Some people just laid out what they could offer. I do Zoom Reiki, you know, like, is that of use to you? And I think it's like thinking about what you have to bring forward, not necessarily. And I think that was sort of the beauty of the group is you showed up with what you had, not. We weren't like, you have to sew this pattern and it has to be this good. I mean, if people were super slow, we'd maybe say, well, maybe this is
the right spot for you, right?
Yeah, maybe there are other ways you can help support. But we really I think what you want to offer up to the movement, or you know, maybe you're a great photographer or good amateur and you can help document maybe, and I think about what it is you care about and just making the offer forward. Would this be of any use if I helped you run your Instagram? Like we have an auntie just do our Instagram account, you know? Would it help you if I pump this out or that out? And like, think about what you're willing to give and do and start there. For me, I love this food bank and I've been thinking about a new project where I create a food bank, but it sounds really intimidating. I don't want to do that with my whole life, right? Like, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I didn't fail because I refused to start my own food bank,
Right.
but maybe is an existing food bank that needs people to know it's there. And so that's why I was like, well, I'll be your food bank influencer. That's kind of fun for me. And it'll be good press for you. So I've turned a lot of people onto the food bank.
That's really great because there's so many food banks everywhere that really either need some volunteers, need some donations, or just need to spread the word. Stuff. Right. And what you said,
at least in LA, there's food banks that I'm hearing in LA that are running out of stuff. And then here's a particular, and sometimes there are food drives and they're like begging people to take the boxes. And then there are other food bank lines where people camp out the night before for a box of food. So our distribution systems are all messed up. And so for me, I see myself as an intermediary that now that I have I'm aware of all these communities that have certain needs, I just put them on the phone with Glenn, the food bank, and they go over there and they pick up stuff for their community, right? I don't want to drive it over to their community, but I can help make those calls and connections. So I think it's about thinking where you could plug yourself in. I don't think everyone needs to become a nonprofit. I feel like I specifically did not want the Auntie Sewing Squad to become a nonprofit because nonprofits are kind of indefinitely and forever and have to...
and there's a lot of rules and requirements and money and, that has to go into it, that really those resources and that time could be deviated into, helping solve the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially with mask making, like some of the aunties are like, you could pay yourself a salary. It's like, the thing is, I don't want to do this forever. Yeah. We should not want to have to do this forever. We want to become obsolete. And the goal of every nonprofit ultimately should be to become obsolete, to fix the problem you set out to solve, not forever be codependent on it.
Yeah, good
But unfortunately, that's what we're seeing is a lot of nonprofits have to sort of pimp out the issue so much that they,
it's kind of like that dating app. I think what's it called, like Hinge or something, and their tagline was, this app was meant for you to delete off your phone or something, right? You're supposed to find the right person in your life.
To be deleted, that you meet your person. I mean, I think it's like things don't always need to become bigger, better. Yeah. Salaries, more aunties. We actually had to hide our group after a while because every time we got a new influx of even 20 or 30 aunties, it was like so much work to show them the ropes of the system. Yeah. And it was like, we don't need, while in theory you could get more done with thousands of aunties, it's so much work to manage them. And it shifts the dynamic of how we relate to each other because we became sort of a community. So we were like, I think it's okay to close off the group. Right. And
I think what you said earlier too, that you don't have to save the world. Right. Yeah. You don't have to think about how can I go way out here, and change everything. Like if we just look really probably next door or downtown or something like that, there's going to be a place for that. And I that really hit home for me recently. I have been wanting for several years to start like this soap for soap program to where it was like for every bar of soap that I sold, I wanted to donate one to somebody in need. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I wanted to formalize it and make it perfect and pretty and everything before I put it out there. Now, granted, there's several organizations in my community that I just dump soap off to regularly, when they need it. And that always feels great. But it's like, I wanted to make it bigger. And I was like, but maybe I don't need to do that. I just need to keep spreading the word and those people will come to me. Yeah. And that's what happened. I talked to this girl who runs a homeless showers and laundry services for the homeless in Orlando. Mm-hmm. And her and I are starting to connect more on that. It was like, I will find those avenues to give. Yeah. I just have to, I just have to keep doing that. And, I even came up with a little title called like Hygiene Genie. Like,
speaking of soap, the Navajo Nation asked, like, can the aunties sponsor? They have all these hand washing stations. 70% of the Navajo Nation doesn't have running water, but they have all these portable hand washing stations. They got really hit hard with COVID, and they were like, could you buy our soap? And I did the math, and I was like, oh my God, that's like our entire remaining budget to buy soap. And I was like, let me just make a few calls. And I contact Dr. Bronner and another company, Ecos, and they were able to donate soap.
Oh,
right.
fantastic.
And it was just like, that's what I offered. It's like, I know how to.
You're that connector. And the connectors are so important to the situations.
And it's not that they can't ask. It's just they're just running around doing a bunch of other things for their citizens. Right. So so I think it's like we don't have to be the actual one cleaning up the beach, but maybe you have access to something that can help that work happen.
Yeah. No,
or
it's so good.
Or do you maybe, like, I know something that I saw really incredible is during our racial pandemic and the pandemic, during the protests and stuff, the community in Little Tokyo, in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, was raising money to keep to purchase meals for the organizers to eat at their meeting. It's not that they're food insecure, or maybe they are some of them are food insecure, but what a wonderful gesture of support. But what also keeping this restaurant open, right? Is to say, you know, we appreciate your work in building racial justice, and we know how good it feels to have someone offer you a good meal at the end. Yeah. We're gonna get you food. Right.
We have that here a lot in Florida, where people, you know, especially after hurricanes and all the power lines are down, and these influx of, you know, service men come in and women and try to fix our power lines and stuff. And they typically don't have a place to even stay. You know, it could be a hotel and they have no way to get decent meals and stuff. And there's always this crew of people that come together and end up, you know, dropping off food and homemade meals and hot, you know, beverages and things. And it's really so inspiring. It's like this one little gesture can do so much for morale in so many ways.
Completely.
So, you know, I hope from pandemic that we do, even though we're still in pandemic, but I hope that we continue to kind of have this, this more love for each other and this more understanding for each other, that we are all coming from very different places, but at the core, we are all very much the same. And we just need to respect each other on that level. So I really admire what you're doing. And the fact that, you know, I'm still tickled to death to know that I saw you on this crazy, you know, performance artist stage talking about, you know, your pink Mercedes and how it blew up on the highway. And you were just so funny. And now here we are talking about this really grounded movement that you're just driving all of this stuff forward with just your own generosity and your own kindness. It's really
I'm not this nice normally. I don't know. I keep joking, and this is a joke in Sweatshop Overlord, where I'm like, I really had thought during the rapture I would have been the one pushing the shopping cart of my stuff and hitting people with a pipe, and instead I'm like, this is so weird. All right, this is a new side of me, this generous side of me. But, you know, we have that in us. And I think after going through other crises like 9/11 and the 2008 recession, where I thought it was all over, I'm glad that I decided when this pandemic happened, I was like, what if I just gave instead of hoarded, panicked, felt sorry for myself, panicked, you know, and I'm glad I made that choice. And I think I'm not saying to people like give away all your things, but like you have something to offer in any situation, even when everything's been taken from you. I had no income at the top of this pandemic, and now, you know, I can't believe how much I'm working, and a lot of it's because I'm like, you know, have this amazing story about this group.
That's so good. Yeah. No, and I think that's a perfect culmination of, you know, kind of wraps up what you're doing. It's that you've given so much, and now you're getting so much, and it's really, really great. So I just want to thank you for, you know, taking time to join me on my podcast and sharing your experiences, because it's all, you know, to me, it's about inspiration and sharing those stories with each other, that sometimes we find those aha moments with ourselves, or find ways that we might be able to not only strengthen our own foundation, but once we're a little bit stronger, we can reach out and help so many other people in ways that we might never see in our lifetime. You know, you and I are affecting people right now, and we'll never know about it in good ways, I really feel.
Yeah,
so
I hope so.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up our talk today?
The Auntie Sewing Squad has a book called The Auntie Sewing Squad Guide to Mask Making, Radical Care, and Racial Justice. And I would love for folks to pick it up. It's written by dozens of our aunties, and it's a great I think it's one of the few books that come out about the pandemic in the pandemic. But I'm super proud of us for having this document. I think one big thing I had thought as this was happening was like, wow, look at all these amazing women and women of color and Asian American women doing this work. I hope history remembers this. And I got my wish, which, my other wish was for people not to die and for us to move through this pandemic quickly. That did not happen, but at least I feel like there's an amazing record of our work. So I would love for folks to pick that up.
So good that it was documented along the way. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So where is it available for purchase?
You can get it from everywhere from Amazon to Target, but you can also go to bookshop.org.
Okay.
This is so funny because had we known we were going to be in Target, we were all like, we should have written more about socialism and anarchy, assuming that we were going to be sold at Target. But yeah, you can go to bookshop.org, which actually supports local bookshops.
Fantastic. I love it. Kristina, thank you so much for being on my show today. I really appreciate it. Let people know where they can find you. And if you have any upcoming shows, please share that as well.
Sure. I'm Kristina Wong, Kristinawong.com, and MS Kristina Wong at Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. Hey, do you have any upcoming shows? Are you back on tour?
I'm back in Los Angeles. I am talking to theaters right now. I have no show dates, and you've just missed the streaming version of Kristina Wong Sweatshop Overlord. So the best thing I can tell you is just to stay on my social media.
Okay. Do you have a newsletter or something? Can I plug in on your website?
I do. Yeah. You can. I think you can fill it in from my site because I get subscribers that way. If not, write the website and then you'll get added that way.
Okay, because I want to stay update and see what you got going on next for sure. Thank you, Kristina. Again, I really appreciate your time. You're a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that we get a chance to cross paths again in person. That would be really cool. So for those of you that are listening, if you've probably heard me say this before, if you know somebody super cool like Kristina, please reach out to them and put me in touch with them. I would love to get a chance to have them on my show and get a chance to just sit down and talk and share some stories. So until we all meet again, be kind to each other and love one another. Peace out. So before you go today, I want to thank you for listening to this episode. You know, I've built a business on formulating natural household cleaning and body products without plastic bottles or plastic packaging. So if you'd like to give them a try, head on over to wastefreeproducts.com and use promo code GratefulRedhead for 10% off your entire order. Thanks for listening.